I'm way too lazy to properly record and edit this. Let's get into it. I'm probably going to level a spellslinger as one of these two setups, and the reason I think spellslinger is still a really viable leveling setup is that a lot of the early crafts that you want to do in the end game are using spellslinger on a 4-link. I think the damage is still fine. Mostly it's that smoothness of play. So first one, I'm playing a chaos slinger maybe. This is really safe to level with. If all goes wrong, you just go as a straight contagion as, self cast. But as spellslinger, this is fine as is. You can see with my current setup, I still have 261 unreserved mana, and you can see that my SJ costs only 52, while my mana regen's 111. Each trigger will cost me somewhere in the range of about 100 because I'm also running a contagion spellslinger, and this contagion will cost, well, it can cost nothing, right? Yeah, so this contagion will cost 14 mana. If you really end up being that starved for mana, you can always switch out this vitality with a clarity, and that'll be fine. So that's the first one. The second spellslinger set I'm thinking about is spellslinger Eye of Winter. So I've used Freezing Pulse as a sort of proxy. I do think Eye of Winter is going to be numerically quite a bit stronger, and this setup is as an Inquisitor with crit because of how Inevitable Judgment works. The things that make Spellslinger so strong for an Inquisitor as an elemental spellcaster is being able to Essence Craft it with the Deafening Essence, and when then you do this, you're doing this on a wand, and there's basically no dead mods that you can find. You could argue cast speed is bad, but if cast speed is rolled and you get really high, you might just want to go with brands instead, because those will actually scale with cast speed even as Spellslinger. But for the most part, added damage to attacks, add damage to spells, spell crit, spell multi, these are all good mods that you want to hit. I'm using these Essence Crafted gloves eventually as I get in. Early on, you won't be able to get 70% multi, you'll need to metacraft to do that, but the other two mods are pretty much guaranteed, and that still gets you to about 600k tooltip, which I don't know what that'll be in Eye of Winter numbers, but I assume that it'll be higher. If it's not, well, the skill's kind of shit. The question that will come up is about whether or not you can run RF and Petrified Blood. You can. I've tested this on a league start. The only thing that you suffer from is the fact that you don't really have great sustain, or really much sustain at all once this goes down. But as an Inquisitor, at least you can, maintain it because of Pious Path. Next setup I'm thinking about is doing a Spellslinger Stormbrand, and this is with an Elementalist. The reason I want to go Elementalist is because of cast speed being very important, and Liege of the Primordial is still quite beneficial. So I'm running one Ice Golem, one Flame Golem, and one Lightning Golem with this node. Spellslinger with Stormbrand is really strong because, this is wrong, because you get to use Swiftbrand. And Swiftbrand, even though it got nerfed by 20%, is still really strong support. And Spellslinger, because of the frequency enabled this, it also lets you get Frenzy Charges, which benefit Stormbrand a lot, right? Having cast speed and damage. So that's pretty big. I don't need a Hex Touch here. This can become a Culling Strike, which becomes 10% more damage. And otherwise, I have a Spellslinger Petrified Blood, or a Spellslinger Hydrosphere inside my life setup, Arrogance, and then a Spellslinger Assassin's Mark on my other setup. So Hydrosphere ends up working as a supplementary clear to Stormbrand itself, as opposed to using like a Herald skill or Impulses early on, which you can't really get. The actual damage here is already close to 1 million, because you actually have 2 Stormbrands. I mean, if I do the calculation properly, you can see it. Bang, bang, whoopsies, here. And you can see, yeah, it's 932k. But you can just use your eyes and multiply this by 2. One of the reasons you're able to do this on less mana than you are with the Chaos Slinger is that I'm running Inspiration, and Inspiration should not be ignored in the generic caster setups. So it not only helps you with Reservation, it also helps you with the cost of the skill, right? So if you look at this, like, the Reservation's only going up a tiny bit from using Inspiration. And that's because the line about reduced mana cost also applies to Spellslinger, which is pretty important for this kind of shit. So these are the 3 main setups. The last setup I'd be going with is a Trapper. And I don't really want to talk about it too much, but the reason I want to go Trapper is to transition into Stormrain. And this number isn't exactly accurate. In doing some math and whatnot, we're thinking that it probably gets to about 100 million on a preload. And I'd probably level this as an Explosive Trapper, or maybe an Ice Trapper. It just depends on how I feel. It depends on how hard the campaign is. If the damage is too high, then I'll be leveling as an Explosive Trapper. But if the damage feels good early on, then I'll level as an Ice Trapper and transition to Doomfletch the moment I can get the bow. And the reason why you can level so smoothly as either of these things is the early tree looks something like this. And this is really easy to do as a generic spellcasting trapper, right? Because you're taking trap nodes into some multi, into this, into Clever Construction, into Blast Cascade, and Master Sapper. And these are really strong nodes early on. So I know this will be a good setup. leveling as traps is always really straightforward. I don't really want to go through it. Basically, you just pick this tree, you pick up traps, and then you use them however you want. But the only reason I would ever do this is to eventually use Storm Rain. I'm not super sure, but these are basically the 4 options I'm looking at for a League start right now. So the biggest reason why I'm leveling with these builds is to eventually transition to some other builds, right? So if I level as an Inquisitor, I'm going to be transitioning into a Herald of Thunder Inquisitor later on, and this is crit based using the Timeless Jewel. If I level as a Spellslinging either Stormbrand or Chaos, that gives me a lot of options for how I want to transition. If I'm going Stormbrand, I'm probably going to transition to Herald of Thunder Elementalist, and this is using the Crest of Desire helmet, and I'll go through this a bit later. I'll demo this separately. Or I might transition into one of the Eye of Winter options that I have available. Eye of Winter self-cast, it should be fine. The reason I'm not doing it right away is because I'm a bit worried about the base cast speed being 0.85 or something like that, and it's super freaking slow. Or I might transition to Relic of the Pack depending on the availability of that wand. And then if I end up going with Chaos, there's always the option of just staying Chaos. Essence Contagion might be what I end up transitioning into, just to farm. It's really, really safe. Alternatively, there's also Bane, which is quite strong, and Soul Rend. So in my current setup for Spellslinger Chaos, if I switch over to Soul Rend on my main skill, I get easily over 1 million DPS. It's closer to like 1.5 right now with my setup. So those are sort of my transition options. I don't really want to leave the POBs yet. A lot of them aren't really good. I mean, the damage on these are fine. Like, there's none of these POBs won't be able to do the endgame. And I've tested these things with these exact numbers in the current league because nothing actually changes for some of these builds. Or the builds become stronger in the case of Relic of the Pack. So I know that they will work. The only one I don't know whether or not will work is Storm Rain. But it's just that there's so many mistakes inside these Path of Building links that it's just a bit embarrassing to even show them, I guess. But people are asking what I'm doing. And this is what I'll be doing. Now, in terms of how to specifically do it and how to transition, that's on you to figure out. You're smart enough.